Hello, folks. Welcome. There's been a lot of talk online about the whole thing with the motor trend developments.
For years, viewers watched Ian Roussel create automotive magic on Full Custom Garage. Every episode showed sparks flying, metal bending, and impossible ideas turning into real machines. To fans, Ian looked like a man living the dream. He had his own shop, total creative freedom, and millions of people cheering him on from their living rooms. But what the cameras never showed was the cost of that dream. Behind the polished edits and dramatic music was a much darker reality, one built on exhaustion, pressure, and a version of success that slowly started destroying the very passion that made him famous. Long filming days became normal, 12, sometimes 13 hours under studio lights and desert heat. Temperatures inside the shop often crossed 110 degrees. Crews needed multiple retakes. Builds had deadlines that had nothing to do with real craftsmanship and everything to do with TV schedules. Real creativity was replaced with story beats, fake tension, and forced drama. What once felt like art began to feel like factory work. Over time, Ian wasn't just building cars anymore. He was performing a character. At one point during production, Ian reportedly collapsed from heat exhaustion. It wasn't dramatic enough for television, so it never made the final cut. But for him, it was a warning. His body was starting to fail under conditions that no one at home could see. The same job fans thought was a dream was quietly becoming something he had to survive. Ian Roussel was born on November 19, 1970, in Sunland, California. Even his birth came with confusion. Some official records listed 1971 instead, an error that later caused endless debates among fans about his real age. The mistake was blamed on paperwork chaos following a major earthquake that shut down government offices. His family always stuck with the original date, celebrating every year with a homemade cake shaped like a license plate that read 11-1970. Locals still remembered the strange hailstorm that hit the area the day he was born, covering roads in ice and forcing a neighbor to drive his mother and newborn home in a lifted pickup truck. From the very beginning, Ian's life felt slightly off script, and that theme followed him everywhere. His father, Jerry, worked at Lockheed Skunk Works during the day, surrounded by advanced aerospace technology. At night, he transformed their garage into a workshop. He brought home leftover aircraft aluminum, scrap metal, and tools that most kids would never even recognize. Ian didn't play with toys the way other children did. He built things. By the age of 8, he was already making go-karts out of airplane parts. While other kids were learning how to ride bikes, Ian was learning how to gap spark plugs and read cam lift tables. Between the ages of 8 and 15, father and son spent thousands of hours in that garage. Jerry kept detailed project logs, and years later, Ian calculated they had worked together for over 4,000 hours. That was more time than most people spend at full-time jobs in 2 years. And Jerry had one strict rule that shaped Ian forever: build first, drive later. You didn't touch the road until the machine was perfect. One of their earliest major projects was restoring a 1955 Chevy Nomad they bought for just $75. The floor was completely rotten, so they replaced it using sheet metal originally meant for aircraft. 32 evenings of cutting, welding, and shaping. That same wagon still sits in Ian's current shop today, not as a showpiece, but as a reminder of where everything began. School was never where Ian felt alive. He graduated from West Valley High School in 1989 with a GPA of 2.7. On paper, he looked average. In reality, he was already far ahead of most professionals. Instead of showing up to graduation in a normal car, Ian parked his half-finished 1929 Ford Model A pickup right in front of the gym. It was raw metal, bright orange wheels, and completely illegal to drive. The principal told him not to bring it. He did anyway. That same year, he scored the highest grade ever recorded in the school's metal fabrication final, 98 out of 100. The only points he lost were because his final report was hand-drawn instead of typed. That truck, built from parts taken from 11 donor vehicles and less than $700 in total, ended up featured in Rod and Custom magazine. 2 weeks later, Ian turned down a drafting scholarship. His explanation was simple. College can't weld. Ian was an only child. No siblings to share tools with. No one else to blame when something broke. His mother, Donna, documented everything with photo albums, tracking every build, every failure, every strange creation. Years later, when producers started developing full custom garage, those family binders became the visual blueprint for the entire show. His real life literally became television content. By the time he was 12, his Christmas gifts weren't toys. They were tools. A stick welder, an English wheel, equipment most adults didn't even know how to use. Ian didn't see cars as transportation. He saw them as sculpture. At 9 years old, he spent 6 weeks carving a 4-foot replica of a 1932 Ford grill out of foam, then coated it in fiberglass just to study the shape. It didn't move, it didn't steer, it didn't matter. In art class, he once submitted a rolling clay model instead of a painting. It had no doors, only a hatch on top. The teacher thought it was a joke until it won county honors. Even today, Ian admits he often forgot practical things like steering wheels. He was obsessed with form, not function. After high school, Ian skipped college entirely and threw himself into Southern California's underground car scene. While his classmates were picking majors, Ian was learning from legends. He worked in the shops of Boyd Coddington, Chip Foose, and Jesse James. During the day, he built for them. At night, he built for himself. He slept very little. He learned everything. By his early 20s, his work was already showing up at major events like SEMA and the Grand National Roadster Show. At just 22 years old, he opened his own shop. Most people in the industry didn't take him seriously. He was too young, too weird, too broke. But Ian didn't need approval. He had a torch and a vision. The first few years were brutal. At one point, he was literally living in the back of the shop, sleeping on a couch next to his tools, and surviving on instant noodles. But what he lacked in money, he made up for in fearlessness. While other shops turned down strange requests, Ian said yes to everything. Space-age bumpers, Cadillac parts welded onto Ford frames, aluminum windshields shaped by hand. Word spread. People started parking outside just to watch. Customers became his marketing. His builds didn't look like anything else. Some called them genius, others called them ugly. Traditionalists said he was ruining classic cars. Ian didn't care. He wasn't trying to preserve history. He was trying to create something new. That rebellious style is what eventually caught the attention of television producers. They saw something different, something raw, something that could be turned into entertainment. And that's where everything started to change. Because once the cameras arrived, the garage stopped being just a workshop. It became a set. And Ian stopped being just a builder. He became a character. When Full Custom Garage first aired, it felt like the perfect match. Ian Roussel finally had a platform big enough to show the world what real custom building looked like. No fake restorations, no shiny showroom nonsense, just raw metal, crazy ideas, and one man turning imagination into machines. The show made him famous almost overnight. His name spread beyond car circles and into mainstream television. People who had never held a wrench suddenly knew who Ian was. But fame changed the garage. What used to be a personal workspace slowly turned into a production factory. Builds were no longer driven by inspiration. If a car wasn't finished on time, it didn't matter how good it was. the schedule always won. Producers needed drama, they needed conflict, they needed moments that could be cut into trailers. Real life doesn't work like that, so they started shaping it. Scenes were reshot, conversations were repeated, problems were exaggerated or even created just to make the story more exciting. Ian wasn't just building cars anymore. He was acting out a version of himself that the network wanted. The quiet, obsessive craftsman was turned into a TV personality. And the pressure never stopped. Filming days often ran over 12 hours. The shop lights added to the desert heat. Sparks flew, cameras rolled, and breaks disappeared. There were days when Ian barely ate. The crew went home. The fans went to bed. Ian stayed behind to actually finish the builds. The work you see on screen was only half the story. The real work happened after everyone else left. Over time, his body started pushing back. He suffered from chronic exhaustion, dehydration, and stress-related health issues. At one point, he collapsed from heat exhaustion during production. It wasn't shown. It didn't fit the narrative, but it shook him. For the first time, the job that had defined his identity almost took him out. The hardest part wasn't even the physical toll. It was the loss of control. For someone who had spent his entire life building exactly what he wanted, being told what to create felt like betrayal. He had built his reputation on saying yes to crazy ideas. But now the craziest idea was being forced to meet network expectations. Cars were no longer personal expressions, they were content. Fans started noticing changes too. The builds felt rushed, the problems felt scripted. The show didn't feel as raw as it once did. Some viewers blamed Ian, but behind the scenes, Ian was quietly burning out. He eventually began speaking honestly about the darker side of reality TV. In interviews and podcasts, he admitted that much of what viewers saw wasn't real. The drama was staged. The timelines were fake. The pressure was constant. He said the show nearly destroyed his love for building. That confession shocked fans. Because for years, Full Custom Garage had been marketed as the most authentic car show on television. The idea that even this world was manipulated made people question the entire genre. Ian wasn't just exposing his own experience. He was exposing an industry. The success brought money, recognition, and global attention. His builds were shipped to Europe, Japan, and beyond. Celebrities and collectors lined up for custom projects. On the outside, it looked like he had everything. But inside, he felt trapped in the very machine he helped create. At some point, Ian realized something terrifying. He wasn't building for himself anymore. He was building to survive. The garage that once felt like home now felt like a job site. The tools felt heavier. The ideas felt forced. The passion felt distant. And the audience he once loved started to feel like an obligation. Eventually, Ian stepped away from the show. Not with a dramatic announcement. Not with a big goodbye. Just quietly. And that silence said more than any episode ever could. Stepping back gave him something he hadn't had in years. Space. Time. The ability to build again without cameras, without deadlines, without pretending. Slowly, the old Ian began to return. The one who carved foam models just to study shapes. The one who built because he had to, not because someone was watching. Today, Ian Roussel is still building, still creating, still obsessed with metal and motion. But he's more careful now. He knows what fame costs. He knows what happens when art becomes content. His story isn't just about custom cars. It's about what happens when passion becomes product, when dreams become schedules, and when the thing you love most becomes the thing that nearly destroys you. Ian Roussel didn't lose his talent. He almost lost himself. And the real tragedy isn't what happened on television. It's what happened when the cameras were off.